The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sterile corridors of Children's Hospital of Philadelphia as Ozzy Osbourne made his way through the pediatric oncology ward, his usual rock star confidence replaced by the careful reverence that hospital visits always demanded. At 75, he had participated in dozens of charity events and hospital visits over the years, but the weight of being surrounded by sick children never became easier to bear, never lost its ability to humble him completely and remind him of life's most precious fragilities. This particular visit had been arranged by the Make-A-Wish Foundation after several young patients had specifically requested to meet the Prince of Darkness, not because they were drawn to his dark persona, but because his music had somehow provided comfort during their most difficult treatments and lonely hospital nights. What most people didn't realize was that Ozzy approached these encounters with the same meticulous preparation and emotional investment he brought to major concerts, researching each child's condition, interests, and personal story so he could connect with them as complete individuals rather than just fulfilling a celebrity obligation. The hospital's child life specialist, Dr. Sarah Chen, had briefed him extensively on the afternoon schedule during their walk through the brightly decorated corridors that tried unsuccessfully to mask the underlying medical reality of the institution. 6 children, ages 7 to 14, each fighting different forms of cancer with varying prognoses and treatment timelines. Some were in active treatment phases with good chances for complete recovery, while others were facing terminal diagnoses that no child should ever have to understand, much less navigate with the limited emotional resources of youth. If you're enjoying this story so far, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could show your support with a like. Your encouragement means the world to writers like me and helps stories like this reach more readers. Each visit would be carefully tailored to the individual child's current energy level, specific interests, and emotional needs, with flexibility built in for good days when children felt like talking and playing, and difficult days when simply having someone present might be the most meaningful gift possible. The last child on your list today is particularly special to all of us here, Dr. Chen explained as they walked toward the final room of the afternoon, her voice taking on the softer, more personal tone that healthcare workers used when discussing cases that had touched them deeply. 8-year-old Timothy Martinez has been with us for almost 7 months now, undergoing intensive treatment for acute lymphoblastic leukemia. While his medical prognosis is actually quite good, we expect full recovery with continued treatment. The psychological and social aspects of his case have been extraordinarily challenging. She paused outside room 314, checking her notes and gathering her thoughts before sharing information that was clearly difficult for her to discuss, even as a professional who dealt with family tragedies on a daily basis. Timothy doesn't get many visitors, unfortunately. His father left when the diagnosis was confirmed, apparently unable to cope with the reality of having a seriously ill child and the long-term commitments that pediatric cancer treatment requires. His mother, Isabella, works 3 different jobs to pay for medical expenses that aren't fully covered by their insurance, so she can only visit during evening hours when she's finished with all her shifts. The information hit Ozzy like a physical blow to his chest and stomach, creating the kind of sick feeling that came from hearing about injustices that seemed impossible to understand or accept. Having raised 3 children of his own and understanding the absolute devotion, fierce protection, and unconditional love that parenthood required, he couldn't begin to comprehend how anyone could abandon a sick child during their greatest time of need. The practical challenges of medical bills and work schedules he could understand from his own experiences with family crises, but the idea of a father simply walking away from his child's battle for life was completely incomprehensible to someone who had learned that being a parent was the most important role he would ever play. So he spends most of his days essentially alone, Dr. Chen continued, her professional composure beginning to crack slightly as she described the daily reality of Timothy's hospitalization. He has our nursing staff and other medical personnel who are wonderful with him, and he's developed relationships with some of the other children when they're feeling well enough to interact. But he's dealing with the profound loneliness and abandonment that comes from facing such a serious illness without adequate family support, and that emotional burden significantly complicates his treatment and recovery process. When they entered the room, Ozzy was immediately struck by how small and vulnerable Timothy looked in the standard hospital bed, surrounded by machines and medical equipment that seemed designed for much larger patients. The boy's head was completely bald from months of chemotherapy treatments. His skin had the pale, translucent quality that came from extended periods away from sunlight and normal childhood activities. But his dark eyes were remarkably alert and intelligent, taking in every detail of his famous visitor with the careful, mature attention of someone who had learned not to take any positive experience for granted. Despite his obvious physical frailty and the medical tubes and wires that connected him to various monitoring devices, there was something in Timothy's posture and expression that suggested an inner strength and resilience that had been developed through months of facing adult challenges with the limited emotional resources of an 8-year-old child. "Hi, Timothy," Ozzy said gently, approaching the bed with the same careful, non-threatening movements he used around his own grandchildren when they were sleeping or feeling unwell. "I'm Ozzy. I heard you wanted to meet me, and I've been looking forward to spending some time with you this afternoon." Timothy's face immediately lit up with the first genuine smile Ozzy had seen since entering the hospital, a transformation that seemed to bring color back to his pale cheeks and energy to his tired eyes. "You're really him. You're really Ozzy Osbourne. I can't believe you actually came to see me. I thought maybe they were just saying that to make me feel better." For the next hour and a half, they talked about everything except cancer, medical treatments, and the various machines that beeped and hummed around Timothy's bed. The boy was fascinated by stories about touring different countries, the technical aspects of recording studios, and what it was like to perform for thousands of people who sang along to every word. He asked thoughtful, surprisingly sophisticated questions about songwriting processes, the music industry's evolution over decades, and the creative inspiration behind some of Ozzy's most famous songs, showing an intelligence and curiosity that reminded Ozzy powerfully of his own children at that age. "I want to be a musician too when I grow up," Timothy confided, pointing to a small electronic keyboard on his bedside table that looked well used, despite the sterile hospital environment. "The music therapist comes twice a week and has been teaching me to play different songs, and I've been writing my own music about being in the hospital and missing my friends and school and just normal kid stuff that I used to do before I got sick. Would you play something for me?" Ozzy asked, genuinely interested in hearing what this remarkable young boy had created during his months of treatment, isolation, and processing experiences that most adults would struggle to handle emotionally. Timothy's original song was musically simple but emotionally profound, a melody about feeling scared but trying to be brave for the adults around him, about missing normal childhood activities like playing outside and going to school with friends, but also about finding unexpected moments of hope and kindness from nurses, doctors, and other patients who had become his temporary family. His voice was thin and somewhat weak from medical treatments, but it carried genuine emotion and authentic expression that would have impressed any professional musician or music critic. "That's absolutely beautiful, Timothy," Ozzy said, when the boy finished playing, meaning every single word and feeling genuinely moved by both the musical composition and the emotional honesty it represented. "You have real musical talent, but more importantly, you have something meaningful to say through your music. Those are the two essential things every great musician needs, and you already have both of them at 8 years old." They continued talking about music, family memories, and Timothy's dreams for what he wanted to do when he recovered completely and could finally leave the hospital to return to normal childhood activities. The boy spoke with remarkable optimism about wanting to return to school, reconnect with friends who had gradually stopped visiting as his treatment stretched on for months, and maybe even perform his original songs for other people someday who might be going through similar difficult experiences. As the visit was naturally drawing to a close, Timothy grew noticeably quieter and more thoughtful, as if he was working up the courage to say something extremely important, but wasn't sure how to begin or whether it was appropriate to ask. His hands fidgeted with the hospital blanket, and he kept glancing at Ozzy and then looking away, clearly engaged in some internal debate about whether to voice whatever was on his mind. Finally, after several minutes of this obvious internal struggle, he looked directly at Ozzy with an expression that was simultaneously hopeful and heartbreaking, vulnerable and brave in the way that only children could be when they decided to risk everything on the possibility of adult kindness. "Mr. "Osbourne," he said, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying the weight of months of loneliness and longing. "Can I ask you something really important? I know it might sound weird or stupid, but I've been thinking about it for a long time." "Of course, mate," Ozzy replied immediately, instinctively leaning closer to ensure he could hear whatever Timothy needed to say. "You can ask me anything at all. Nothing you could say would sound weird or stupid to me." Timothy took a deep, shaky breath, gathering all his 8-year-old courage for what was clearly the most important question he had ever asked anyone in his young life. The silence stretched for several seconds as he searched for exactly the right words to express a need that was both simple and incredibly complex. "My dad left when I got really sick, and my mum has to work all the time to pay for my medicine and the hospital and stuff like that," he began, his words coming out in a rush as if he was afraid he might lose his nerve if he spoke too slowly. "I know you already have your own kids and your own family and everything, and I know you're probably way too busy and important to think about stuff like this, but..." He paused again, and Ozzy could see tears beginning to form in the boy's eyes as he prepared to voice his deepest need and greatest hope. "Can you be my dad, even just while I'm here in the hospital? I promise I wouldn't be any trouble at all, and I know you probably can't really do something like that, but I just really miss having a dad who cares about what happens to me." The question hung in the antiseptic hospital air like a prayer, innocent and desperate, and filled with the kind of pure hope that only children could maintain in seemingly impossible circumstances. Ozzy felt tears immediately welling up in his eyes as he processed what this incredibly brave little boy had just asked him. Not for an autograph or a photo or even a promise to visit again, but for the fundamental human connection and parental love that every child deserved, and that had been cruelly taken away from him by circumstances completely beyond his control. For several long moments, Ozzy couldn't speak at all. The weight of the question, the absolute trust it represented, and the profound need it revealed were emotionally overwhelming in ways he hadn't experienced since his own children were young and vulnerable. He thought about Jack, Kelly, and Amy, how central they had been to his recovery from addiction and his personal growth as a human being, how being a father had given his life meaning and purpose that went far beyond any professional achievement or public recognition. He thought about the countless nights he had spent beside their beds when they were sick, the school events he had attended, the conversations about fears and dreams and growing up that had shaped both his children and himself. He thought about how devastating it would be to face a serious illness without that foundation of parental love and support. "Timothy," Ozzy finally said, his voice thick with emotion and completely stripped of any pretense or performance. "I would be absolutely honored to be your dad for as long as you need me to be, and probably for a lot longer than that." The smile that spread across Timothy's thin face was radiant and transformative, bringing genuine color to his pale cheeks and light to his tired eyes in a way that seemed almost miraculous given his physical condition. "Really? You really mean it? You'll actually be my dad?" "I mean it with my whole heart," Ozzy replied, gently taking Timothy's small, fragile hand in his own weathered ones. "From this moment forward, you're my son, and I'm going to be here for you through absolutely everything. The good days and the really difficult ones, all the treatments and procedures, the recovery process, and whatever comes after that. Whatever you need from a father, I'm going to do my best to provide." What followed was an extended conversation about what being father and son meant to both of them, with Timothy asking questions about whether he could call Ozzy dad and whether Ozzy would visit him regularly, and maybe even meet his mother when she came in during her evening visits after finishing her multiple jobs. Ozzy explained that being a father meant unconditional commitment, emotional support, and love that didn't depend on circumstances or convenience, and that he was completely prepared to provide all of those things for as long as Timothy wanted them. "There's something else I want to do right now," Ozzy said, pulling out his phone with hands that were slightly trembling from the emotional intensity of the moment. "I want you to meet the rest of our family, because if you're going to be my son, then you need to know your new family members." He called Sharon, who was at home in Los Angeles handling various business matters, and explained the situation that had just developed. Within minutes, she was on video chat with Timothy, welcoming him to the Osbourne family with the same warmth, genuine affection, and protective maternal instincts she had always shown her own children and grandchildren. She promised to send him care packages filled with books, games, and family photos, and to include him in all the family updates, celebrations, and everyday communication that kept the Osbourne family connected across distances and busy schedules. The nursing staff, who had been watching from the doorway and trying to maintain professional composure, were openly crying as they witnessed this extraordinary moment of human connection and spontaneous family formation. Dr. Chen later said it was one of the most moving and authentic scenes she had ever witnessed in her 15 years of working with seriously ill children and their families. But Ozzy's commitment to Timothy went far beyond emotional support and family inclusion. Over the following weeks, he quietly arranged for the best pediatric oncologists in the country to consult on Timothy's case, ensuring that he was receiving the most advanced, cutting-edge treatment available anywhere in the world. He hired a private tutor so Timothy could continue his education during treatment and maintain connections to academic goals and intellectual growth, and arranged for professional music lessons via video call with some of the industry's most respected and patient instructors. More importantly, he kept his promise to be present in Timothy's daily life in all the ways that mattered to an 8-year-old boy facing adult challenges. He called every morning before Timothy's treatments began and every evening before bedtime, attended medical appointments via video call when he couldn't be physically present, and flew to Philadelphia every few weeks to spend extended time with his adopted son, often staying for several days to provide consistency and stability. The story of their relationship, which became public after a nurse shared a photo of them together with full permission from Timothy's mother, quickly captured international attention and media coverage. But rather than treating it as a publicity stunt or celebrity charity gesture designed to generate positive headlines, most coverage focused on the genuine father-son bond that had developed between them and the measurably positive impact it was having on Timothy's treatment compliance, emotional state, and overall recovery process. Timothy Strong became a global social media phenomenon, but not in the way that typical viral stories develop around celebrity involvement in charitable causes. Instead of focusing primarily on the famous person's generosity, it became a platform for serious discussions about the needs of hospitalized children, the crucial importance of family support during medical treatment, and the various ways that communities could better support families facing pediatric cancer and other serious childhood illnesses. Thousands of people from around the world shared their own stories of illness, recovery, chosen family, and the importance of emotional support during medical crises. Child life specialists at hospitals throughout North America and Europe reported significant increases in volunteer applications from people wanting to provide companionship, tutoring, and surrogate family support to isolated young patients whose biological families were unable to provide adequate presence and emotional stability. 6 months after their first meeting, Timothy's cancer went into complete remission, a medical outcome that his doctors attributed not only to the excellent treatment he had received, but also to his improved emotional state, better treatment compliance, and the psychological benefits of having stable, loving family support throughout his recovery process. His transformation was remarkable, not just medically, but emotionally, socially, and intellectually. Having a father figure who was consistently present, emotionally supportive, and genuinely invested in his future had given Timothy confidence, hope, and resilience that translated into better cooperation with medical procedures, more positive interactions with hospital staff, and an overall attitude of determination rather than resignation about his treatment and recovery. The most important part of getting better, Timothy told a journalist who was writing a comprehensive feature about pediatric cancer recovery and family support systems, wasn't just the medicine and the doctors and all the medical stuff, though obviously that was really important. It was having a dad who believed I was definitely going to get completely better and who was excited about all the things we were going to do together when I was healthy again and could leave the hospital. Ozzy's approach to fatherhood with Timothy was informed by decades of experience raising his own children, but also by his understanding of what this particular child needed based on his specific circumstances and personality. Timothy needed consistency, emotional security, intellectual stimulation, and someone who saw him as a complete person with potential and dreams rather than just a patient with a medical condition requiring treatment. Timothy taught me that being a father isn't just about biology or legal relationships or even living in the same house. Ozzy reflected in a comprehensive interview about the experience. It's about commitment, presence, unconditional love, and showing up consistently for someone who needs you. Some children need fathers who will appear in their lives and stay there, regardless of how they came into your life or what circumstances brought you together. 2 years later, Timothy was not only completely cancer-free, but thriving in ways that exceeded everyone's most optimistic expectations. He had returned to school, where he quickly caught up academically and began excelling in both traditional subjects and music programs. He had reconnected with old friends while also making new ones, and was performing his original music at local venues and school events with Ozzy's encouragement, professional guidance, and proud parental support. More importantly, he had developed the emotional confidence and psychological resilience that came from knowing he was unconditionally loved and valued by someone who had chosen to be his father and had consistently demonstrated that commitment through both words and actions over an extended period of time. The relationship had also profoundly impacted Ozzy's perspective on family, success, responsibility, and what it meant to use fame and financial resources in ways that created lasting positive change in individual lives. Timothy had become a completely integrated member of the Osbourne family, included in holidays, family vacations, major life celebrations, and everyday family communications, just like any other biological family member. Adopting Timothy wasn't charity or a good deed, Ozzy explained in his memoir, which was published the following year and included an entire chapter about their relationship and its impact on his understanding of fatherhood. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made, personally and as a human being. He brought joy, purpose, hope, and perspective to our family that we didn't even know we were missing. He made all of us better people. Timothy's biological mother, Isabella, who had initially been overwhelmed by the challenges of single parenthood during her son's life-threatening illness, found herself with a co-parent who provided both emotional and practical support that made her own life significantly more manageable and her son's recovery much more likely to succeed. Rather than feeling displaced or concerned about her role in Timothy's life, she was deeply grateful to have someone who shared her absolute commitment to Timothy's well-being and future success. The arrangement allowed her to reduce her work hours from 3 jobs to 2, spending more time with Timothy during his recovery, while also maintaining the financial stability necessary to support their basic needs. Ozzy's support was comprehensive but respectful, enhancing her parenting rather than replacing it. 3 years after that first meeting in the hospital room, Timothy performed at one of Ozzy's concerts, singing his original song about hope and recovery for an audience of 20,000 people. The performance was broadcast live and viewed by millions more online, becoming a celebration not just of his musical talent and recovery, but of the chosen family that had formed around his need for love and support. When I asked Mr. Osbourne to be my dad, I just wanted someone to care about me while I was sick and scared, Timothy said in an interview before the concert performance. I never imagined I was asking for a real father who would be in my life forever, who would teach me about music and life and what it means to be part of a family that loves you no matter what. The story became a frequently referenced case study in pediatric psychology and social work programs, demonstrating the crucial role that emotional support and family stability played in childhood cancer recovery and long-term psychological development. Hospitals began implementing formal programs to connect isolated young patients with volunteer mentors and surrogate family members, recognizing that medical treatment was most effective when combined with comprehensive emotional and social support systems. But for both Ozzy and Timothy, the most important outcome was simply the authentic father-son relationship they had built together over time. It proved that family could be chosen as well as inherited, that love could emerge from the most unexpected circumstances, and that sometimes the most profound human connections developed when people were brave enough to ask for what they needed and generous enough to provide it completely. The day Timothy asked me to be his dad was the day I understood that some of life's most important opportunities come disguised as requests for help, Ozzy reflected years later, during a speech at a children's hospital fundraising event. He thought he was asking me for something, but really he was offering me the chance to be part of something beautiful and meaningful that changed both our lives forever and made both of us better than we were before. The question that had made millions of people around the world cry had also created a family bond that would last for the rest of their lives, proving that sometimes the most powerful and transformative response to a child's need is simply saying yes with your whole heart and meaning it completely. So, thank you for experiencing this deeply emotional story about the power of chosen family and unconditional love. If this tale of how one child's brave question led to a life-changing bond touched your heart, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could show your support with a like. Your engagement helps stories like this reach more readers and reminds us all that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply say yes when someone asks for our love and support.